Everyone may be seated. We are back on the record after a mid-morning break and ready to resume with direct evidence witness. Go ahead, Ms. Hughes.
Thank you. Now, officer, the video that we just watched, that happened the day after Chloe's death, is that correct?
Correct.
So that would be in the afternoon on July 20th, 2018?
Yes.
And while you were asking questions and completing this interview, were you able to make physical observations and look inside that closet where the defendant had said that this had occurred?
Yes, I was.
And did you notice, and did you observe any signs of struggle inside that closet?
I did not.
Did you see any damage inside that closet?
I did not.
I know that some things had already been removed, including the chair and the rod, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you notice any vomit on any of the items that were still in that closet?
No, I did not.
And I know that the ladies and gentlemen of the jury just watched the video, and at times it was hard to hear. Did you specifically ask Kelsie about how the pants were positioned when she indicated, or how she indicated she found Chloe?
Yes, I did.
And what did she say to you?
Kelsie advised that Chloe had tied a knot around the dowel rod and that she had found Chloe essentially with her neck in the crotch region of the pants, just essentially with her neck laying there, I believe, to the left-hand side of her body.
And I know that you continued to ask questions throughout this interview, correct?
Correct.
And you also asked, at some point, you asked Kelsie, you asked her what it felt like when she picked Chloe up. Do you
Yes.
recall that?
Yes, I did.
And what was Kelsie's response?
She advised that Chloe felt like dead weight.
Now, after you conducted this interview on July 20th, 2018, what, if anything, did you do with regards to this investigation?
Would have been the following day after we concluded an interview. We did a search warrant at the residence. We seized cell phones. We seized additional items that were of potential evidentiary value. I did additional search warrants that included cell record search warrants, Facebook, Snapchat, phone records that would have included text messaging, phone logs. We did more interviews, myself and then other officers involved in the investigation, which included Kelsie's father, first responders. We spoke to a couple of Chloe's teachers at school.
You indicated that you also were able to draft and get search warrants on for several things, correct?
Correct.
Did that also entail the residence and vehicles?
Yes, it did.
Now, on July 23rd, 2018, did you attend the autopsy of Cloe Chandler?
Yes, I did.
And where was that autopsy?
It was a state medical examiner's office in Ankeny.
Now, you indicated that you had when you met with Aaron and Kelsie on July 20th, you indicated that you also would like to do an interview at the police station with them, is that correct?
Correct.
Were you able to set up an interview at the police station with the defendant, Kelsie Thomas?
Yes, we set that interview up for, it would have been the 21st, I believe. It was the Tuesday following the autopsy.
Would that be the 24th?
Correct, yes.
And who was present for that interview?
Myself and DCI agent Don Schnicker.
And when you say DCI agent, do you know what DCI stands for?
Division of Criminal Investigation.
And that interview was conducted with the defendant on, as I think you indicated, July 24th, 2018, correct?
Correct.
And did you complete that interview with Kelsie Thomas on that date?
Yes, we did.
Did you ask Kelsie if she would be willing to come back and talk to you again?
Yes, we did.
And when was that interview initially set up for?
That would have been 2 days later on the 26th, I believe, would have been Thursday.
And that was July 26th was the date that you and Don Schnitter interviewed the defendant for the second time?
Correct.
And initially, were you, you talked to Kelsie, there was a day in between, and you talked to Kelsie again, correct?
Correct.
Initially, did you try to set up that second interview for the following day, meaning the 25th?
I believe we did. I believe one of the other, assisting agency being the DCI, the state. We just needed a little bit more time in between, so it was set up with a day between.
Were you the agent, or were you the officer that was contacting Kelsie and Aaron to set up these interviews?
Yes.
Were you then present for the second interview on July 26, 2018?
Yes, I was.
After that interview, what, if anything, did you do?
At the conclusion of that interview, Kelsie was placed under arrest.
Now, after Kelsie was placed under arrest, what do you generally do when somebody's placed under arrest?
Once they're placed under arrest, they're taken to the Wapello County Jail, which in this instance, we essentially just had to walk her down the stairs and into the jail. And then we start the booking process, which consists of myself or other officers completing an arrest sheet, and then a photo is taken, and then they're screened prior to going into the jail.
During the processing or the booking, while you were doing that, who was present?
Agent Schnicker and I were.
Was the defendant present as well?
Yes, she was also present.
And during that time, were you equipped with any type of audio device?
Yes, the area of the jail that we were in is video recorded, and I also had an audio recorder going the whole time.
And where was that audio recorder located?
Would have been in a pants pocket.
And did you have an opportunity to listen to approximately a 2-minute, 16-second snippet of that actual interview, or that period where you were processing the defendant, Kelsie Thomas?
Yes.
And was that clip that you listened to prior, did you actually have the opportunity to listen to that earlier today?
Yes, I did.
And was that a true and accurate recording of the conversation, or that 2-minute and 16-second part of that conversation that you had with the defendant, Kelsie Thomas?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask to admit into evidence State's Exhibit number 92, which is a 2-minute recording of that audio.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
State's Exhibit 92 is received.
And Your Honor, at this time, I would ask permission to publish to the jury.
State's Exhibit 92 will be played to the jury during that time. The court reporter will not be recording.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Aaron does have this phone, which we will allow to use the phone. Charged with.
That apparently was the conclusion of State's Exhibit 92. We're back on the record. Go ahead, Ms. Hughes.
Now, Investigator Sieren, were you able to just listen to that 2-minute clip?
Yes.
I know here in this courtroom it was a little bit hard to hear, is that correct?
Yes.
Earlier when you were able to listen to it, were you able to hear it a little bit more clearly?
Yes.
At the beginning of that clip, what, if anything, are you talking to Kelsie about?
So the initial conversation, and just so you have an understanding, generally we always audio record everything. In the jail, it's a little hard to hear back there because it's cinder block walls, so everything's kind of reverberating. Those audio recorders are in her pocket, so anytime we move, unfortunately, it kind of makes a racket on there. So the initial conversation, I think you can probably hear me say, can you look at the ball on the wall there? I was just taking her picture, finishing up the arrest sheet process. And then I explained to her what I was going to do with her keys and personal belongings that we had. I believe Ms. Thomas's husband was out in the lobby at that time, so I told her I could give that property to him. And explaining to her that she wanted to make some phone calls once we got her into the actual jail. She could make those phone calls just because we were in the booking area and we were going to be leaving in a minute, so she can make those phone calls in there.
Now, at some point then, did you ask Ms. Thomas if she had any questions for you?
Yes, it did.
And then after that, what, if you recall, what did you indicate, or what did you ask her after that?
Asked Ms. Thomas if she felt that we had been fair to her. She responded by essentially apologizing for the way she treated us. And then we just went on to explain, we understand, we're just trying to get to the bottom of everything that occurred.
Your Honor, I have nothing further at this time.
Cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Sieren, other than denying that she killed her daughter until the very end, Kelsie Thomas cooperated in every aspect of your investigation. Isn't that true?
Yes.
By my count, she spoke with Sergeant Leffler both at her house and at the hospital on the day that Chloe died, correct?
Yes.
You interviewed her again the next day on July the 20th in the walkthrough video that we just observed, correct?
Yes.
Also on July the 20th, the same day as the walkthrough, law enforcement became aware of suspicions that Callie Cookett and Brittany Johnson had, is that correct?
Yes.
At the time, were you aware of how close or distant these people were to Kelsie's immediate family?
Prior to speaking to them, no.
Okay. Were the suspicions of Callie Cookett and Brittany Johnson documented in police reports?
Yes.
Those same police reports were provided to the medical examiner for her case history prior to autopsy?
I did not provide her with any. That would maybe be a better question for Investigator Schenker.
Okay, but you are aware that she was provided with police reports?
I don't know at what time she was provided them.
And then on July the 23rd, you traveled up to the medical examiner's office to watch the autopsy be performed, correct?
Correct.
Who was the medical examiner in this case?
Now that you've asked me, her name's eluding me.
Would it have been Dr. Michelle Catalier?
Catalier, correct. This is the first time I'd ever met her.
Okay. At the conclusion of Cloe Chandler's autopsy, did you have an opportunity to visit with Dr. Catalier? It's a yes or no question, sir.
Objection.
Objection overruled. It was a yes or no question.
Did you have an opportunity to speak with Dr. Catalier after the conclusion of her autopsy examination?
No.
At what point did you have an opportunity to discuss her findings with her?
There was general conversation during the autopsy. I left prior to the conclusion. Investigator Adams and I were there for several hours, but we went back to the police department prior to the conclusion of the autopsy so we could continue working on the case.
Okay. And as case agent, you are aware that Dr. Catalier did not render an opinion on the date of autopsy, correct?
I don't recall exactly what date that she rendered an opinion. Again, there was general conversation during the autopsy, things that she pointed out to us, things of concern to her.
And based on those concerns, she asked that you do further investigation, correct?
I don't recall that day if she specifically asked us to do specific things.
As you sit here today, can you say whether or not Dr. Cavalier rendered an opinion on the day of autopsy or not?
Again, as I previously stated, I don't know at what point she gave a full medical opinion on what her beliefs were.
The day after autopsy, you and Special Agent Schnitker interviewed Kelsie Thomas on July the 24th, is that right?
Correct.
And what time did that interview begin?
I believe it was shortly after noon.
And what time did that interview end?
I believe it was at 6:40.
Okay. So that interview would have taken about 6 hours, is that correct?
Yes.
Approximately?
And I may stand corrected on the exact time. I do believe the first interview lasted about 6 hours. I don't remember if that was those are the exact times.
Okay, give or take, correct?
Yes.
At the conclusion of that interview, Kelsie Thomas agreed to come in again the next day on July the 25th, correct?
I believe the interview was set up for the 26th.
Okay. Well, actually, she agreed to come in the next day, but due to scheduling conflicts with the PD, she actually showed up that day and she was turned away because, as you said, DCI didn't have their scheduling correct. Is that right?
I guess I don't recall if she showed up, but I do know that the interview was actually, there was a day in between.
And you and Special Agent Schnitker interviewed Kelsie Thomas a final time on July the 26th, correct?
Correct.
You know what time Kelsie Thomas appeared at the Law Center to be interviewed?
Can you repeat
Slow
the
down.
last question? You and Special Agent Schnitker interviewed Kelsie Thomas on the 26th.
I'm sorry, the question was, you and Special Agent Schnitker interviewed Kelsie Thomas a final time on July the 26th, correct?
Correct.
What time did Kelsie Thomas appear at the Law Center to be interviewed on July the 26th?
I don't recall the exact times. I do recall the approximate length of the interview, though.
Which would have been?
Investigator Schnitker and I interviewed her for, I believe, about 3 hours.
Okay. Did any other law enforcement agents conduct any interviews of Kelsie Thomas that day?
Yes.
And in fact, she was subject to about 8 hours of questioning on that day?
Again, I don't recall the exact times. I believe she had arrived at the Law Center shortly after noon or maybe a little bit before.
Okay, if the report reflects 10 after 10, does that refresh your recollection?
If that's what my report indicates, I would say that would be an accurate time.
So, just roughly again, Kelsie Thomas spent nearly 6 hours being interviewed on the 24th and a little over 8 hours being interviewed on the 26th, correct?
Yes.
At the conclusion of your almost 6-hour interview with Kelsie Thomas on July the 24th, she consented to having a DNA swab taken and her and her husband's phones were seized and analyzed, correct?
They were taken pursuant to a search warrant. I don't recall if she would have consented.
She didn't offer any resistance to that, did she?
No.
How do law enforcement officers like yourself examine cell phones?
Our agency is fortunate enough, we have a Celebrate software. It's rather expensive. It's able to essentially, depending on the phone, take some or all of the information off, including sometimes deleted information.
And specifically, did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to obtain Kelsie Thomas's cell phone information from July the 19th, 2018, the day that Cloe Chandler died?
Yes.
And what information were you able to obtain, just generally?
There's generally nothing of great note. When the Celebrite pulls information, essentially it's going to pull off, in this situation, it pulled off her texts, call logs, and things like that. So I would have had that information pertaining to the 19th. Okay.
And just earlier in your testimony, you indicated that this expensive equipment that you have at the PD does have the capability of telling whether or not information had been deleted from a person's phone?
It totally depends on the download, depends on the phone. There's a ton of different factors. A lot of times on like text messages and things like that, call logs, that doesn't indicate. It's more for like social media, things like that.
Okay. Regardless, that equipment didn't identify anything that Kelsie Thomas deleted from her phone that would have been relevant in this case, correct?
I don't believe so.
And I believe, as you indicated earlier, but just so the jury's clear, did you otherwise discover any evidence on Kelsie Thomas's phone that helped show that she was involved in Chloe's death?
No.
May I approach your Honor?
You may.
Investigator Sieren, I'm handing you what I had previously marked as Defense Exhibit J2, and while we're on break, I had you take a look at the same document. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you recognize what that document is?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what that document is?
It appears to be essentially a clip of the Celebrate download that I would have conducted on Kelsey's phone.
Okay. And when you conducted that Celebrate download of Kelsie Thomas's phone, you examined the information that was contained to determine if there was any relevant information there, correct?
I can't say that I looked through every page of that download, but pertaining to that day, yes.
And certainly the phone activity of Kelsie Thomas on July the 19th would have been something that you would have been interested in looking at specifically, correct?
Absolutely.
And you did do that in this case, correct?
Yes.
Now, the excerpt that I've provided there in Defense Exhibit J2, in the far left column, it has sequential numbers that indicate basically column numbers, correct?
Correct.
And are there any numbers missing?
Does not appear to be.
Okay. So, of that excerpt, and again, I had you review that prior to your testimony, I could have provided the entire page, but that excerpt essentially outlines I believe 6 actions that were taken on Kelsey's phone beginning at 3:14 on July the 19th. Is that correct?
Correct.
And if we look at that first column, it appears that Kelsie Thomas's phone would have received a text message at 3:14 from a Jody. Is that correct?
Correct.
Based on your investigation, do you understand who Jody to be?
I could be wrong. I believe that was Aaron's, maybe grandma or Kelsey's grandma.
Okay. Grandma Jody sound familiar?
Yes.
Okay. And according to this report, 1 minute later at 3:15, Kelsey responds to Jody, correct?
Correct.
The first 4 entries depicted here are a text conversation between Kelsey and her grandmother Jody.
Yes.
Is that what it appears?
Yes.
And the last 2 entries that are shown on that excerpt, are those text records or phone records?
Call logs.
Okay. And based on your investigation, who was engaged in a phone call with Kelsie Thomas's phone that is demonstrated in those last 2 columns?
It appears she placed 2 phone calls to her husband, Aaron.
Okay. And that would be in the indication of what received, it says hubby, is that correct?
Correct.
And you understood that to be Aaron Thomas, correct?
Yes.
So it appears from this record that 2 minutes after texting with Grandma Jody, Kelsey made a phone call to Aaron Thomas, and then, again, according to the record, 5 minutes later, she made another phone call to Aaron Thomas. Is that correct?
Correct.
So wouldn't it be accurate to say that not only did you not find any incriminating evidence on Kelsie Thomas's cell phone, that excerpt comports substantially with the timeline that she gave repeatedly about the events of that day, correct?
Objection.
Basis?
Speculation and calls for a conclusion.
Objection overruled. Witness may answer.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. Based on that record supports Kelsie Thomas's initial version of events, and the same one she maintained for several hours of interrogation, as far as she was napping, she received a text message from her grandma, it woke her up, she called Aaron, she got up, and then she called Aaron again. That's what that record demonstrates, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would move to admit Defense Exhibit J2.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Defense Exhibit J2 is received.
Now, Investigator Sieren, during your 14 hours or so of interrogation of Kelsie Thomas, did you discuss the pajama pants with her at all?
I did not interrogate her for 14 hours. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Well, let me rephrase. During your conversations with Kelsie Thomas, did you discuss with her the pajama pants?
Yes.
And in fact, you brought that up several times, did you not?
Correct.
When did you tell Kelsie Thomas that you knew about those pajama pants?
Could you be more specific?
Well, in fact, you told Kelsie Thomas several times that you knew that those pajama pants did not cause Chloe's death, correct?
I believe what was stated was we believe those were not, the pants were not what was used in the manner essentially she said they were.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
Now, isn't it true, Investigator Sieren, that prior to Kelsie Thomas's confession, you told her, quote, again, we know that's not true because she wasn't strangled with those pants. Do you recall telling her that?
I probably could have, yes.
And if the transcript of that interview, the second interview, indicates that, you wouldn't have any reason to disagree with that, correct?
No.
Later, and again prior to her confession, you had indicated, quote, it'll show, and by that you were referring to the evidence, it'll show that those pants are not the mechanism that caused her injury, which makes your story a lie. Do you recall telling Kelsie Thomas that?
I'm sure I did say that.
Okay. Prior to her confession, you told Kelsie Thomas, quote, I'm telling you that the marks around your daughter's neck were not consistent with any of the items you said were around her neck. Do you recall telling her that?
I'm sure I did say that.
And if the transcript showed that these were not the only occasions in which you challenged Kelsie Thomas about the pajama pants being the mechanism of injury for Chloe, again, you wouldn't have any reason to dispute that, correct? That was brought up several times, and the jury would be able to see that for themselves.
Yes, the pants were obviously a large focal point of our conversation, so I'm sure we may have said it in excess of 20, 30, 40 times, maybe, I don't know.
So how is it then, Investigator Sieren, that ultimately you accepted Kelsie Thomas's confession that she strangled Chloe with those same pajama pants?
So the basis of our initial investigation was essentially that we did not believe her story that Chloe had accidentally hung herself in this closet. Essentially, our viewpoint on it was, we couldn't confirm whether those pants were used or not, but what we were saying was those pants, the way you described it, would not have, in our opinion, made the marks that they were making, that were observed during the autopsy.
Were your questions to Kelsie qualified in the same way that you just qualified those to the jury?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well, here you're saying, we don't think that those pajama pants made the mark in the way that you described. Do you ever recalling qualifying your statement to Kelsie Thomas in that way, the 30 or 40 times you just indicated you confronted her with this information?
So our interview of Kelsie,
It's a yes or no question, sir.
could you repeat it?
The question was, the question is, Investigator Sieren, do you recall qualifying your statement to Kelsie Thomas at any time in the interview in the way that you just did with the jury?
In those exact words, in that exact manner, no.
Generally speaking, you were confronting Kelsie Thomas with your belief, your indication that the evidence shows those pajama pants were not how Cloe died. And you did that, in your own words, 30 to 40 times by estimate?
As it pertains to Cloe hanging in the closet, yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Nothing, Mason.
You may step down and may this witness be excused.
Yes.
You may also be excused and leave the courtroom if you choose to do so.